The Tyranid index have arrived, and with that we, well, have everything we need to know about Tyranids, except for points, which matters a lot, but we know all of the datasheets, all of the abilities, all the things that the Hive mind has in plan for 10th edition, and in this video we're gonna go through not all of it, some of it. I did originally have a video where I went through every single data sheet, and let's just say that video was long, like very long. This video is gonna be long as well, but not nearly as long as that one. What I wanna do is I just kinda wanna talk about the highlights, what I think personally. I also want you to keep in mind that I am not a Tyranids player. I've played against Tyranids plenty in 9th edition, but I don't play them myself. Also, keep in mind, I am not a super competitive player. I am, I want to say, an average competitive player, meaning that I care about playing the game on a competitive level. I just don't care enough, like, whether or not I should have brought 15 Tyranid warriors instead of, 10. I'll use the stuff that I like, and then I'll try and do it in a way where it's as efficiently as possible, playing the game smartly. But I'm not the type that will bring something I don't like just because it's good. Or spam something just because it's good. I don't like that playstyle. That's not for me. So, with that in mind, what do I think about the Leviathan Index? First of all, we have the rules and the attachment ability. We've already seen this, and I might even have talked about it at some point somewhere. In any case, when it comes to the army rules, they seem underwhelming, but as I kind of suspected, it seems like Battleshock matters quite a bit more than people first thought. From the demo games we've seen of people playing with the Leviathan box on various YouTube channels. We can see that if you fail Battleshock, that is bad. You cannot use stratagems, you cannot hold objectives, and that matters a lot for playing the mission. And then Synapse is a rule where we're like, okay, 3d6 on Battleshock is good, but how good is it? Well, actually Synapse also plays into a lot of stratagems and even some abilities, I believe. So in that way, Synapse is also quite good. Looking at the detachment rule, I mean, it's great that you can adapt on the fly, meaning that you can go to one game and use one thing, and then go to another game and use another thing. It's not something you need to build into your list. I am under the personal impression that the best one for a majority of games will probably be hyper-aggression, but that is mostly because I'm predicting a very monster and vehicle heavy meta. And as we are about to see, Tyranids weapons have seen quite a bit of well, a nerf, to be fair. I mean, everything got nerfed mostly in 10th edition, but Tyranid weapons seem to have taken a lot of nerfs across a lot of different datasheets. That is, of course, something that we can't truly predict until we start playing. In any case, though, yeah, as I said, I think their army rules are better than they seem, and so far the battle reports we've seen also seem to indicate that. And for hyper adaptations, I mean, if you're playing against something that's not bringing monster and vehicles, you can of course take the sustained hits one. But in general, I'm gonna go ahead and guess that hyper-aggression is gonna be the correct pick into a lot of matchups. For these stratagems, I think all of them look good. Obviously, the fight on death one is not as good as the Space Marine one, but the Space Marine one is also 2 CP, whereas this is only 1 CP, but you have to roll the dice to see if you get to fight on death. The best stratagems, in my opinion, are probably Rapid Regeneration as well as the Synaptic Insight. They're both 1 CP, and they're both very effective if you are in Synapse range, because then you get a benefit on top of what the stratagem normally does. So Rapid Regeneration is normally a 6-up Feel No Pain in your when you're being shot at or someone is fighting against you. But if you're in Synapse range, it's a 5-up Feel No Pain, and a 5-up Feel No Pain is where we start really seeing an increase in toughness. Well, not toughness, but how tough you are to kill. So that's a great stratagem. Synaptic Insight lets you, go with the lethal hits, for example, and then if you're in Synapse range, you can choose up to 2 Tyranid units that also get another adaptation, letting you get sustained hits or precision hits as you need it. I think those are really good. The Revive strat is, it's a Revive strat. Revive strats have always been quite decent. Now, this is limited to be targeted on your, spammy horde units. Still pretty solid. In general, I think all the stratagems are solid. Adrenal Surge is really good, but it's 2 CP, so it's a bit on the spicy side. But if you really need to make sure you get those lethal hits or sustained hits, then Adrenal Surge can be very, very good. Overrun is obviously nerfed from the version we saw in 9th edition, but still pretty good. If you're in Synapse range, you can simply make a 6-inch normal move. And if you're not in Synapse range, well, in that case, you can make a 6-inch consolidation move. Let you move around your unit, perhaps enclose around enemy units, and forcing them to take a desperate escape test or getting behind some cover. And Death Frenzy, as I said, it's a good way to make, in my opinion, fight on death abilities. Either make them expensive or make them, random. So overall, yeah, I think good stratagems. I'd say Death Frenzy might not be a good stratagem, but it's a fair stratagem, is probably how I would word it. If we look at the enhancements, all of them seem good. However, if you're unaware, you're able to take 3 enhancements in any army list. No one can have more than 1 enhancement, and epic heroes cannot be given enhancements. So something like Abaddon and Guilliman and the Swarmlord for Tyranids will not be able to take any of these. But Alien Cunning is redeploy 3. Redeploying is just really powerful. You can use it to position something aggressively, and then if you don't get first turn, you can put them back defensively. Or vice versa. If you put something defensively and you get first turn, you can put them further up the board or somewhere else. Redeploying 3 units, just really good. Synaptic Linchpin will just increase your synapse range to 9 inches instead of 6 inches. As we just seen with the stratagems, there's quite a lot of upsides to being inside synapse range, such as being able to use a stratagem on an additional unit, or getting more benefits, such as with the 5-up Feel No Pain. And again, people might be looking at this, be like, that's not that good, maybe. If I think about how many Space Marine players I've played against that took the relic, the Vox Espiriatum, the Vox caster thing, that increased their aura by 3 inches, I think I want to say 8 out of 10 players had it in Space Marine lists. And so increasing your aura is good. Now, this is not increasing your aura, it's increasing synapse specifically. But I think it's quite solid. I think people might be looking at this and going like, it's not that good. But do remember, you take this for free. It doesn't cost you anything. I think it's quite good. Perfectly Adapted is where I'm like, I can see a few niche cases for this. The first time I read it, I thought it was, you could do one of each, but it says or at the end. So you can do one of all those things or reroll one of all those things once per turn. So once in your turn, once in the enemy turn. So it's not terrible, but it's still only 1 dice. And if you want a killy Hive Tyrant, I can see that. But in general, out of these 4, Perfectly Adapted is probably at the bottom of my list. And then Adaptive Biology is probably on top of my list. Just giving something a 5-up Feel No Pain, great. But then if it survives until the next turn and has taken some damage, it now has a 4-up Feel No Pain. That's really good, yeah. In general, I think I would say that Alien Cunning is the best one. Then the next best one is probably Adaptive Biology, followed by Synaptic Linchpin, and then at the bottom, Perfectly Adapted. Now, just because Perfectly Adapted is at the bottom doesn't mean it's bad. I'm just saying you can only pick 3 of these, and you have 4 choices. In my opinion, that's the order of ranking I would pick them in, unless I'm doing something specific where I want, for example, a killy Hive Tyrant. Then I might take Perfectly Adapted. Speaking of the Hive Tyrants, we see that the Winged Hive Tyrant might have finally met his match with the GW balance team. He's seen quite a significant nerf. He's still a pretty chunky boy. I mean, toughness 10, 2-up save, and 10 wounds, with a 4-up invulnerable save. Not bad at all, not bad at all. However, he is unable to join any units as a leader. He cannot get a lone operative, and he does not have stealth. And if you've played against a Tyranids player, you've played against a Hive Tyrant, and you know how fucking big their wings are. He is very hard to hide, and the damage output he can give is also way down compared to 9th edition. The Heavy Venom Cannon used to be, 3 attacks at damage 4, AP 3? Now, it's still a good weapon, but it's D3 attacks now. The Stranglethorn Cannon is D6 plus 1. I'm not gonna look up all the profiles, but I just know from my own experience that most of Tyranid stuff have been nerfed. And at the end, I'll give a conclusion on things I've noticed when I've looked at all these data sheets. But the Winged Hive Tyrant is definitely nerfed. Now, his auras are quite good. Let me move my camera over here, actually, so you can see the text a little bit better. His aura is quite good. Subtracting 1 from all attack characteristics of weapons in the fight phase, that's pretty solid. It makes it so he can fly into something, deal some damage, and then if that thing survives, the damage it'll put back is reduced. And then Will of the Hive Mind is something that all the Hive Tyrants have, whether it's winged or on foot, where you can use a stratagem for free within 12 inches. That's also just good. Seeing as you can only take 1 ranged weapon or 1 melee weapon, if I were to build a Winged Hive Tyrant right now, it would be a melee version. Whether or not I would go with the Monstrous Bone Sword and Lash Whip, or with the Monstrous Scything Talons, I'm a bit unsure of. You're either getting 6 attacks at weapon skill 2, strength 9, -2, damage 3, or you're getting 9 attacks because you get to attack with the Tyrant Talons and then additionally with the Scything Talons. So 9 attacks on 2s, 7 minus 2, 2. Strength 9 is just like, it's the same with the Custodian Castellan axes. Strength 9 is just not good enough from what we know right now. Most vehicles and monsters seem to be toughness 10. I mean, the Winged Hive Tyrant is T9, but he also has wings, so he's a bit, squishier. But most big things just seem to have toughness 10. And so strength 9 doesn't really do a whole lot for you. You do, of course, get +1 damage, but that also means, like, at damage 3, you have some very specific targets you want to go into, and then it feels bad putting those attacks into something like, let's just say normal Space Marines. So if I were a betting man and had to make a guess at what kind of Hive Tyrant you would see in 10th edition at this moment, I would say the Monstrous Scything Talons and Tyrant Talons melee version of the Flying Hive Tyrant. The other Hive Tyrant, the melee one, not the melee one, the on foot one, however, can take 1 pair of melee weapons and then a ranged weapon, for example. Or he can take 2 melee weapons, however, he is unable to take 2 ranged weapons. His stat line is the same, except for he gets +1 toughness, but he then also loses 4 inches of movement. Unlike the Winged Hive Tyrant, however, he is a leader and can be put into a Tyrant Guard unit. He also has the free stratagem within 12 inches ability. And then he has the Onslaught Aura Psychic ability, which is, while a friendly Tyranid unit is within 6 inches of this model, ranged weapons equipped by models in that unit have the Assault ability. So basically everything around him can advance up the board and then still shoot their weapons. And I could imagine that's quite nice to have on something like the Barb Gaunts. They have 24-inch range, which is, decent, but they're not indirect, and being able to advance and then shoot might be able to give them some more targets and get to where they want to be a bit easier. You could also use it on something like the Zoanthropes, which we'll be talking about a bit later. But yeah, I think Onslaught is a pretty good ability for the Tyranids, because they have a lot of slightly short-range weapons, so at least it's not bad to have. The Hive Tyrant himself, as I said, you can go with either a melee weapon and a shooting weapon, or 2 melee weapons. And again, if I had to be a betting man, I'm gonna go ahead and say you want to take the Heavy Venom Cannon and then the Monstrous Bone Sword and Lash Whip, because there's really no reason to replace your Monstrous Bone Sword and Lash Whip with the Monstrous Scything Talon, because, you just get less attacks. And in any case, that would be my guess on the Hive Tyrant. The Swarmlord is simply, well, not simply, but is just like a slightly better version of the normal Hive Tyrant when it comes to melee and shooting output. His shooting is like so different that it's hard to compare it, but the melee version is just straight up better on the Swarmlord, and then he also comes with some abilities that are just way different. But stat line wise, they are the complete same. So what the Swarmlord does for you is that he generates you 1 command point at the start of your command phase. Once per battle, he can increase the cost of one of your opponent's stratagems by 1, and then he always have a 9-inch synapse range. All of those are solid abilities. I am wondering why he doesn't also have the you can use a stratagem for free, but I guess giving him, gain +1 CP kinda balances out, sorta, maybe. We still don't know the rules about bringing multiple Hive Tyrants or a Swarmlord and a Hive Tyrant, so we'll have to wait and see if we can bring both. If you cannot bring both, depending on points, I might be more willing to take a Hive Tyrant instead of the Swarmlord if I had to choose between the two. But that might just be me. Alright, another standout for me is the Broodlord, but not because he is great, but what he does for the unit he can join is great. He can join Gene Stealers, and if he joins Gene Stealers, every model in that unit gets Devastating Wounds. He himself already has Devastating Wounds alongside Twin Linked, and Twin Linked means you can reroll the wound roll. Now, if you don't remember from the preview from 1.5, 2 weeks ago, Gene Stealers can reroll a wound roll of 1 if they're attacking anything, but if they're attacking something on an objective marker, they can reroll the entire wound roll instead. So if you have a squad of 5 Gene Stealers alongside the Broodlord, you're looking at 20 attacks from the Gene Stealers, hitting on 2s, with full wound rerolls against something on an objective, and 6s are mortal wounds instead of normal damage. So a squad of Gene Stealers led by a Broodlord that does a 8-inch pre-game move because they have Scout 8. And if they can then, get on an objective turn 1 or just get an objective in general, they probably put out what, like 10 to 12 mortal wounds if you're fishing for 6s. And then there's all the normal damage on top of it. The 10 to 12 mortal wounds is counting the Broodlord's attack as well. My point being that you can put out a decent amount of mortal wounds fairly easily. Of course, there are some prerequisites, such as being on the finger fighting is on an objective. But yeah, I think that's a pretty solid combo. I know a lot of people has already talked about it, but I thought it was worth mentioning. Another standout for me are the zoanthropes. The Neurothrope is no longer a character you can take by itself. It is simply a zoanthrope leader. And thank God, because oh my god, the free up invulnerable save has screwed me so many times when I played against it. And the zoanthropes are not terrible either. T5, so not super tough, but not squishy either. 3 wounds, pretty solid. And a 4-up invulnerable save. What I think is great about these guys is their ranged weapon, which is the Warp Blast. You have the normal version, and then you have the focused version. The normal version is D3 attacks, hitting on 3s, strength 7, AP 2, damage D3. So if you have a squad of 3 of these, you're looking at an average of 5 shots with the normal profile. Or you can shoot 3 shots with the focused profile, which has lethal hits. Just 1 attack each, still hitting on 3s, but strength 12, AP 3, and damage D6 plus 1. That is powerful. And funnily enough, this is among the best anti-tank shooting in the army. And it comes on, as I said, a fairly, decent body. You can totally kill a zoanthrope, no problem about that. But killing one zoanthrope doesn't just remove them from the game, such as killing one big monster with a good gun. You're talking 3 to 6 models that have these profiles, because each and every model can shoot with this profile. You of course never want to get them into melee, but if you think back to the Hive Tyrant and his you can advance and shoot, or rather if you're within range, your weapons have assault. It said range weapons, which also counts for this because even if it's a psychic weapon, it's still a range weapon. So advancing around the board with zoanthropes, shooting at 24-inch range, not terrible. It's a really good anti-infantry profile, and then you also have a really good anti-monster vehicle profile. They also give out a aura of 6-up invulnerable save to anything else. And if something fails a battle shock test when they're close, that enemy unit takes D3 mortal wounds, and this unit regains D3 mortal wounds. So yeah, zoanthropes look quite solid in my opinion, quite solid. Another standout for me are the Venom Thropes, not for their offensive output, because, anti-infantry 2+, it's nice, it's still just damage 1, AP 0, but their aura is within 6 inches. Your units get the benefit of cover and also the stealth ability. And the stealth ability is -1 to be hit in shooting. That's a pretty solid buff to give out to whatever is within reach of these guys. And they're is it 40 millimeter? No, wait, that's way bigger. It's I forget what base size these guys are on, but they're fairly chunky. So if you can spread these guys out and then you have a pretty large aura of getting cover and -1 to be hit by shooting, that's pretty good in my optic. Is that a way of saying things? My optic? I don't think so. I think they're pretty good. Von Ryan's Liebers, everyone's already seen them, but I think they are great. I honestly think after seeing the new warriors, that depending on point cost, these guys might just be the new melee warriors. They are not gonna go ahead and kill every single thing they touch, but they have 6 attacks each. You can take up to 6 of them, so potentially 36 attacks. Hitting on 3s, that's fine, strength 5, AP 1, damage 1, again, not amazing, but they have fight first and can heroically intervene for 3. Now, if you're not aware, fight first in 10th edition is not how it is in 9th edition. In 9th edition, if it was my turn and I charged something, I would pick the first unit that would fight first. In 10th edition, it is the non-active player who gets to decide first. So even if you do charge these guys, they get to fight first. But also, if they use the heroic intervention stratagem, normally they wouldn't get fight first because you don't get the benefits of charging from heroic intervention, but because their ability has to fight first, they would get that. So even if your opponent doesn't charge them, if you are able to heroically intervene into another unit, then you get to fight first there before they get to touch you. They also have a 6-up invulnerable save. And yeah, as I said, dependent on points, I kind of feel like these guys might just be a better version of Tyranid warriors with melee weapons. The one thing that the Tyranid warriors have over these guys is that the Tyranid warriors are OC2. But other than that, I think Von Ryan's Liebers are a better melee unit than Tyranid warriors. Oh yeah, the Tyranid warriors also has synapse, but again, I don't see a world where you want to take Tyranid warriors with melee weapons over the ranged weapons. Because the only difference is the ability they have, which is, it's a fine ability, it's okay. And then the melee warriors get +1 attack and +1 AP, but it's still damage 1. And the Tyranid warriors with ranged weapons gets to fall back, shoot, and charge. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see the points cost. For now, I just don't see a reason why you ever take Tyranid warriors with melee weapons, because you should just take Tyranid warriors with ranged weapons instead, and then Von Ryan's Liebers for melee. That's just my opinion. That's just my opinion. I also really love Old One Eye. I love Carnifexes in general. If I were playing Tyranids, I would be playing a ton of Carnifexes and a ton of like Hormigons and Termagants. Not that many medium creatures like warriors or lictors and all those things. And then Old One Eye would just be my centerpiece, and he would just be so cool. And he has a really good profile. Now, Carnifexes are no longer -1 damage. Probably for the best, because they were really damn good in 9th edition. However, Old One Eye is T9, so fairly tough. A 2-up save, pretty good. 9 wounds, also quite solid. But then he also has a 5-up feel no pain, and at the start of each player's command phase, he regains D3 lost wounds. So potentially, I mean, probably not gonna happen very often, but in a single battle round, he could regain 6 wounds. His melee profile is also excellent, and you might look at his weapon skill and be like, why is it only 3+? Shouldn't he be 2+? Well, if he's leading a unit of Carnifexes, then you can re-roll the hit roll for him and the unit, because he becomes part of that unit, and so his own ability also works on himself. So yes, you are hitting on 3s, but you get to re-roll everything, and you have a very solid anti-tank weapon profile with the strike, and then a really good horde clearing profile with the sweep. Yeah, I'm in love with Old One Eye. If I end up starting a Tyranids army in 10th edition, my first purchase will be Old One Eye. Because I love that guy. Look at him smile. Look at that nice eye he doesn't have. Nah, he's so cool. He's so cool. Also, quickly want to mention the Horus specs. This guy slaps in melee. He's a huge model. He has a long extending tongue. He's very hard to hide. Probably a bit difficult to move around the terrain. But I mean, he is T11, only a 3-up save. Fair enough, still decent. 14 wounds, so he's a chunky boy. He has the precision keyword on his ranged weapon, so if he gets within 12 inches of a unit with a character, he can yoink and eat the character if he rolls high enough on his damage. He has a very good marine profile in the Ravenous Maw. 14 attacks, strength 7, only AP 1, but damage 2. And like, 14 attacks! That's a lot of attacks. And then the Shoveling Claws are extra attacks, which can just devastate like a tank quite heavily. So I mean, if you somehow got this guy into combat with I guess guard, like an infantry squad of guard, and then a sentinel or a tank, you can probably like eat the entire squad of infantry and then deal some decent damage into a tank, or maybe just straight up kill a sentinel. But yeah, he is a chunky model, and also cost dependent on whether or not to bring him. He does have a quite decent ability in the form of, if he kills something and another unit is within 6 inches of that killed unit, they must take a battle shock test, because they just saw all their friends being eaten by all the tentacles and teeth. Very fluffy, and I think quite a decent unit in general. The Trigon isn't half bad either. 10-inch move, toughness 10, 3-up save, 14 wounds, with the ability to be set up within 3 inches of something. Now, if you do this, you cannot charge, which means you only can use your ranged weapon, which is not very good. But if you use your Shadow in the Warp ability, and say a unit on an objective fails their battle shock test, you could, from Deep Strike, put up this guy, and he has OC4, which is, well, more than 0, and so all of a sudden you take that objective from your opponent, and that might help you play the mission, or complete one of your tactical objectives. So, I mean, that's not half bad. Or you could use the new Rapid Ingress stratagem on this guy, so he deep strikes in your opponent's movement phase, or at the end of your opponent's movement phase, and then in your movement phase, he can move 10 inches. And then if he charges something, he'll have 12 attacks, at weapon skill 3, strength 9, AP 2, damage 3. That's a lot of damage, Not enough strength to, like, punch a tank or a dreadnought, but definitely enough to pick up a squad of marines, or even kill a good amount of terminators. Not something to mess around with for sure. Finally, I want to say that the Exocrine is... I'm not sure how to feel about it. His gun is good, but it's not good against vehicles or monsters. However, his ability that lets you reroll hit rolls of 1 after hitting something with the Exocrine seems quite potent. So while I'm not super into the Exocrine himself, I mean, his ability is quite good. The Screamer Killer seems like a really good melee unit. Absolutely go ahead and go crazy with that guy. He looks pretty cool as well. He's got that Predator looking head. Regular Carnifexes look quite good as well. They did lose the -1 damage, but again, probably for the best. Fun thing to note, they are OC3 and you can only take 2 in one unit. But if you combine that with Old One Eye, who's also OC3, you're running around with a quite chunky OC9 unit that has decent shooting, decent melee. And if you shoot at them, they start running towards you. And I think that's so cool. It's like, and then just go. I think that's very funny and very powerful. Carnifexes are looking good. Psychophage looks quite potent as well, especially against Psychers. The Barbgons I talked about briefly at the start with the Hive Tyrant. I mean, their damage output is terrible, but -2 from move, advance, and charge rolls are really good. And that's for everything they hit. I think this is one of the first things that's gonna get nerfed. If anything is gonna get nerfed, it's going to become the same thing it is now, but choose one infantry unit rather than everything you hit. And that wraps up like my first impressions of the Tyranid Index. In general, what I think will be hard for Tyranids is that they lack a lot of anti-tank or anti-monster and anti-vehicle power. They partially make up for that by being able to take the lethal hits adaptation. But of course, that's their detachment rule, which means that when the new codex comes out and they get new detachments, and they no longer have the ability to take lethal hits, well, or rather, if they choose another detachment, they cannot take lethal hits. Will they suffer from that, or will it be okay? It's a bit hard to tell. It looks like Tyranids are going down a route of being much less killy, but a lot better at maybe playing the mission or just playing the board in general. Obviously, it depends on what kind of army you bring and which models are like gonna be costed at what points. But my guess would be that Tyranids are moving into more of a control army rather than a kill army. To be fair, most armies in 9th edition was a kill army because everything was just crazy out of control with AP and damage. And I think that might be why people are reacting the way they are to this Tyranid index, because it's like, oh, but it used to be D6 plus 11 damage. Like, yeah, it used to be absurdly good. Now it's just like, fine. Can you maybe see why? I don't know. That's just my impressions. Guys, this ended up being like a 30-something minute video anyway, even though I went very quickly through the things and only picked a few datasheets to talk about. If there is any specific datasheets that you think look cool, let me know in the comments below, and then be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Well, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and then you will watch all my other thoughts on the various indexes as they'll come out. Thank you so much for watching, and until I see you again, I hope you have a wonderful time.